What's up, Guerrilla Social Workers? This is the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast, your crackerjack clinical insurgents pitting evidence against anecdotes, with your hosts, the Scarlet Lover, Jeff Moore, and yours faithfully, Mace Warren. Jeff and I are both forensic psychotherapists that specialize in the clinical treatment of folks involved in the criminal justice system. We love sharing our misguided musings with all of you, and we thank you so much for your ongoing listenership. Today we sit down with a return guest, the Canadian Crippler, the Yukon Yataghan, the Ontario Outlaw himself, Matt Barnes, host of the Social Work Me podcast. The Social Work Me podcast is a show for social workers, counselors, psychotherapists, and anyone in the mental health profession, as well as anyone looking for more information on improving their mental health and overall wellness. We really enjoyed our conversation with Matt, and we hope you do too. If you like what you hear, feel free to wait until the 5-star rating leaves her desk unattended and computer unlocked. Open her word processor and select the autocorrect option. Replace the word "the" with "you hag," and have fun watching her scramble to get IT to troubleshoot. And now, on with the show. Go.
We're live.
I know, we're live.
Now we're live.
So you were asking about the black eye, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
You know what? Here's what I've noticed about this, the black eye effect, is there's no good answer for it. There's none. Like, there's no answer that you can offer that somebody doesn't have a counter to that as to why you're full of crap and that something else happened.
Like
right?
a rebuttal or
right,
something like a...
Right.
Yeah.
So well, ultimately, just long story short, we'll keep it a mystery as a result of that, because I'd rather keep people guessing, because the real story is pretty unremarkable, right? But this is what I thought about. I was thinking, okay, because if you say, and I'm wondering what people want to hear when they ask about it. I mean, do you want to hear that I saw a damsel in distress?
Yes.
And I intervened. Okay. Told that story at least 2 times. And they're, oh, come on, dude. What's the real reason, bro? I'm like, okay, not acceptable, right? And then something that's actually happened to me. You guys ever heard of allergy shiners?
No.
Okay, it's a real thing. It's a legit thing. I got it when I had it was a certain, because I'm allergic to dogs. Like, I have poodles, but they're hypoallergenic, right? But certain dogs, like a Nita's pit bull, for example, like every now and then when I see it, it'll lick my legs, and I get hives all over my legs immediately, like no nonstop. But I've had other dogs. My buddy had it's called a Weimaraner, and licked my face, got all up in my face, and I got a swollen eye from it. And, I backed off, took some Benadryl, woke up the next day, black eye, right? I'm like, what the hell is this from? And then my allergist said, oh yeah, those are allergy shiners. They exist, right? So I told that story. No, nice story. That's all you got? That's all you got for me? I'm like, okay.
Domestic violence.
Okay, domestic violence, right?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'm like, I fell down the stairs. Like, I mean, what do you want?
You're not going to give us the real reason?
No, the thing is like, even if what if one of those were the real reason, right? It would be unacceptable anyway. There's no answer for it.
I think I'll accept whatever you want to tell me it was.
I'm going to go with less history, more mystery. I like that. I'm going to keep it mysterious.
Yeah, it's like you don't kiss and tell.
Yeah,
when it comes
right?
to the way you earn your black eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. I will tell you though, Jeff and I were doing the rounds one time with presenting to prospective referral sources. And didn't I have dual black eyes? Black eyes at that time, right?
Wasn't that from a cheerleader?
Yeah. That was from a cheerleader. By the way, really sensitive eyes. So, I mean,
that sounds like a story I want to hear.
Yeah. Oh, the cheerleaders?
Yeah.
So, did you know that, Matt? I used to be a cheerleader.
No.
Oh, yeah. National champion, by the way.
He was the top of the pyramid. They'd hold him up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never stood on top of a pyramid ever. or did that. That'd be really dangerous. Although my team, we used to go to national championships all the time. And there was an individual stunt routine. So you and a partner, and, the 1 year that I entered the, individuals, I'll let you guys guess which place I got. And it wasn't second.
Third.
First place, baby. Yeah. You know what they make you do though? What they make you do is they make you relinquish your trophy to the school. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, when I got it.
Well, it's not about you. It's about you did it for Weber State.
No, I did it for me.
How'd you get the black eye?
And I really didn't even do it for my partner. I did it solely for me. Yeah. So I was having conversations with her about like, okay, I'll keep it at my house for 6 weeks, then you keep it at your house for 6 weeks. Nope, I had to give it over to the school. And I was like, wait, what? I have to. It was so stupid. But when you're throwing them up in the air, they'll spin down, and they're kind of taught to tuck their arms, And so when they tuck their arms, their elbows obviously are still doing their thing. So I got one like right on my nose, like right on the bridge of my nose. And then I got 2 black eyes of that. I was bleeding all over the place, but then 2 black eyes of it.
Then we're trying to like promote our company to like referral sources, and he's looking like he needs anger management therapy,
And so what I did is I thought, okay, I'll use this as an opportunity for a segue to a joke. And I said, we even do domestic violence classes. And I took, and I took an experiential course in domestic violence, survivor training. And that's why, that explains the black eyes. I made that joke, 3 times?
Yeah, never.
Every time crickets.
Yeah,
I'm like,
no one ever laughed.
Yeah. Jeff's like, you need to stop making that joke, dude.
Quit with that joke.
It never really.
It doesn't land.
Never really caught any steam.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the
People
moment,
get all serious about it.
It felt right in the moment, Felt right in the moment.
If you don't take risks.
Yeah. So, that was my claim to fame when I was in college. So, cool stuff. Do they have cheerleading in Canada?
They do, but it's not as big as the States.
No?
It's like you guys have big competitions, and like high school cheerleading is a big deal in the States. I don't think it's not like that here. Yeah. At least at the high school I went to.
Well, they had that next Netflix special with Cheer on there.
Yeah. Bring It On or?
Oh, no. It was called Cheer. It was like a reality show.
Oh.
Yeah. It showed like legit cheerleaders doing their thing. I always wanted to watch it and like scrutinize them, Like if you're a tattoo artist, watch it Ink Master.
Yeah.
I never did though. Yeah. Never got.
Doesn't sound compelling.
I thought about it for a second, then I thought about I couldn't live with myself if I watched this.
Yeah. Like I could be doing other things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So they don't have because we have like the Dallas, that's Jeff's team, by the way, the Dallas Cowboys. But they don't have and the Dallas cheerleaders are pretty famous. They're the most famous.
Yeah, America's sweethearts.
Yeah. Did you hear that there was a recent settlement with them? Because one of their, I think it was the coaches or administrators were peeping on them or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they got like some $2 million. Oh,
wow.
Seems like a low number. $2 million?
No, well, that's, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, crazy. So, but yeah, they have like the Maple Leafs. Do they have a cheerleading section? And they're on ice skate. Dude, you guys could do that if you got okay, I'm just saying you could get figure skaters, right? To do cheerleading on top of and come out in between the things and do like those spins and stuff, right? And do cheerleading instead.
Yeah.
Why not?
Right. Dang. Maple Leaf. Yeah.
I don't not like that idea at all.
Right. I think the Maple Leaf. Well, you just call them the cheerleaders.
Maplettes.
The Maplettes.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I've been watching a show on Netflix based in your neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. It's called Murder Among the Mormons.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys seen that?
I haven't watched it. I see it. It's in like the Q thing, but no.
Yeah.
Is it something about cartels or is that?
It's about and I guess in 1985 in Salt Lake City there was like 3 bombings. all because of these documents in the Mormon church that they didn't want to get released. Do you guys know about this?
Yeah, no, I watched so there was so basically they well, I mean, I don't know. Do you care about spoilers? I feel like spoiler alerts should last 1/2 hour after the release of this.
I still get mad when people spoil Game of Thrones for me. I'll watch it one day.
Okay, so
I'll go for
because
it.
you can't really get it. So anyway, this guy, what's his name, Matt? I watched this a while ago. What's the guy's name? He's out of the prison.
I don't know. I've only seen the first episode so far, but they're all like historian document collectors, and the guy that found the golden plates.
No. That's Joseph Smith. We know that guy.
Yes,
we know that guy well.
Okay.
Let me look this up here really quickly.
It's not those brothers that are on death row right now, right?
No. Okay, Murder Among Mormons. This is from Wikipedia approved, so you know it's accurate. Murder Among the Mormons is an American true crime documentary television following Mark Hoffman. So if you looked on O-Track,
I've heard that name.
Looked on O-Track, you can look up Mark Hoffman right now.
Yep.
One of the most notable forgers in history, who created forgeries related to Latter-day Saint movement.
This is salamander things?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Salamander paper.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with it.
So basically, now what's kind of fascinating about this is, they kind of tell you what's going on throughout this, but and there's a whole, I didn't know this existed. This was what was cool to me, is I didn't know there was like historic document collectors. I didn't know that existed. And then also where they find documents is pretty wild, because sometimes they just say, yeah, I found it in this old library in between these books, like the pages of this book, and then some document, and basically they get authenticated using like all kinds of crazy testing, and then the person's supposed to make a bunch of money, right? So a lot of this had a lot of these document collectors and historians who were talking about their relationship with Mark, and just how, like, what a rock star he was as far as just finding documents, right?
Collector.
Yeah. And then wackiness ensues. But the bombings had to do with, I mean, again, this is where the spoiler alert comes in, is they kind of discovered that there was forgery happening. So like the salamander letter didn't even exist. He just wrote that. He's really good at like mimicking people's handwriting. Yeah. And then aging it, which I think they did that on purpose, because the whole time you're like, really quickly what happened, but then you're like, how the hell did he do it? Like, how did he fool all these machines and all these experts into believing that this happened? And then, next thing you know, he's trying to cover that up and trying to blow people up, which, I mean,
like peripherally aware of it.
Who knew? I saw it on Forensic Files forever ago, and you had 30 minutes, and this was, I think it's like a 4-part series, right?
Yeah, 3. I think it's 3. I'm middle of the way through it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so definitely go to the end, because you finding out how he does it is actually pretty cool. But yeah, on Forensic Files, they did it in like half hour. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I kind of knew about it before. Yeah. But yeah, it's worth a watch for sure. It's a fascinating story.
Word.
I love Jeff.
Did that have to do with the LDS cartel? Well, you know what I'm talking about, though?
No, I don't know anything about the LDS cartel.
No, it wasn't the LDS cartel. I was joking about that. But the LDS people got gunned down by cartel members in Mexico. There's this Mormon community in Mexico, and like it was a couple of years ago, just a couple Mormon families got like legit gunned down by some cartel members. I was wondering if they made a documentary about that. It's like, freaking crazy.
No, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it was bad.
Was it because they were LDS or just because they were people?
I don't know. They should do a documentary.
Yeah, if we had a documentary out there, then we know what happened, lazy bastards.
Yeah, it's like someone else's fault.
Yeah, I'd read about it. I was
watching it with my wife, though, and my wife's a therapist, too. She works a lot with kids. Mm-hmm. And so she went down the rabbit hole of the Mormon Church and Warren Jeffs and polygamy. And
my wife's huge into Warren Jeffs. Yeah.
Is she?
Oh, yeah.
69 brides. Like, how did he land on that number?
Well, I have no idea. Yeah. It couldn't have been a coincidence. But yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like she was telling me that they're trying to decriminalize polygamy in Utah.
Really?
Yeah. At least the church is. So.
So not the mainstream church. I know that they, I mean, that would be news to me.
I know.
I mean, a lot of, so they kind of have a separation. There's FLDS, fundamental, like Latter-day Saints, and then, LDS. And so now it kind of, I don't know, nowadays it's Latter-day Saints is kind of what they want to be called. Right. I mean, whatever, Mormons, none of it's really inflammatory, but
I could see the FLDS pushing for that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of always wondered how Homeboy on Sister Wives, there's a whole reality show on this. Sister Wives, how they are not getting prosecuted, right? So I think it's one of those laws that are on the books that's just not really enforced. I think the reason why is because all those are clearly adults, And,
so like you can't fish while sitting horseback, like one of those types of laws that no one enforces.
Right. But these see, the problem with Warren Jeffs, by the way, I think the reason why your wife likes that so much is because Warren, my last name, and Jeffs, right? So there's the fascination angle. Yeah. But I mean, whenever you get into sexually abusing children, that's when it starts to be a problem, right? That's probably right. I think if you have 3 wives, I don't know, people might just feel bad for you. Boom.
Yeah. The whole child sex abuse thing ruffles feathers. Go figure.
Right. Why does it? I swear, can you have a cult that doesn't involve that
sex?
Yeah. Does it exist?
Oh, there was the yoga, David Koresh, all those cults. The Jim Jones. There's always some version of the leader gets to have sex with everybody's wives.
Yeah, there's another one. Have you seen Matt? Have you watched excuse me, Wild Wild Country on Netflix?
No.
Oh boy,
I haven't. I've seen it on there. Is it good,
dude? That is. Have you watched that?
No.
So good. You need to watch it tonight. And I promise you won't stop watching it. What's amazing about that is that it happened in our country, and I never knew about it. Like, it kind of happened when it was in the 80s when we were younger. But I'm like, dude, this happened? How is this possible? It is so
Don't
good.
spoil this one.
I won't say a word about it. Wild Wild Country, just watch it.
Word.
There's my plug. But I just don't understand, like, you could have a pretty successful cult if you just didn't start having sex with everybody. It seems like that's where things start to go awry.
Yeah. Keep it in your pants and you got your commune forever.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to make like an instruction manual, but I mean, it seems like there's room for improvement,
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, but she might be looking into that. There's another, there's on that too. If you guys ever watch, some of our LDS people might hate me for this, but there's a show that was on HBO called Big Love. That was a drama though, with Bill Paxton, R.I.P. And he was a guy who had 3 wives, and it tells you a lot about the FLDS stuff and just learning about LDS religion in general. It's a good watch. It's a good series. Yeah, for sure.
And it got me just wondering if you guys, do you guys work? Like, have you worked with Mormons that have been prosecuted for polygamy or for having child brides, or is that something you guys deal with?
I've had clients that picked up a sex offense that happened to be polygamous, but their index offense, their referring charge, wasn't anything to do with that. But we've had some guys come through the program that have been in some of the FLDS cults, I guess. I don't know. It's like, and for me, it's only ever been guys that were in like groups that I ran. So I was never really able to get like the full on story. What about you? Have you ever had anybody in? Yeah. Like a client?
Yeah. We had obviously I won't use his name. Kind of well-spoken dude, really long hair. He was at Fremont for a long time. Okay, never mind. So you would know him if I, but yeah, he was in our groups, and he was my individual client. And yeah, he would talk often about being part of the like growing up in that and some of the sexual abuse that he experienced as a result of that. And then some of the sexual abuse that he was encouraged to like be a part of. For him though, it was weird because he grew up in a place called Colorado City. That was the name of the place. And for him, he never really knew much different than that. And so like he never categorized a lot of what was happening as sexual abuse. And so we have this occasionally, but this is kind of a more local issue that we start to see in that. I mean, we had a guy from Somalia. He was over at our Region 3 program. Yeah. And so in Somalia, the age of consent, sexual consent, I think is like 12, or it doesn't even exist.
So. Right.
Right. So, and over there, it kind of makes sense in terms of procreation because they have, I don't know, in terms of the percentage of individuals who have AIDS and who are dying or malaria or whatever else is happening,
it's like a life expectancy thing,
right? Their life expectancy is pretty low. Right. And so like in terms of procreation, it's kind of like you gotta, get it while the getting's good. And so, in terms of like having a 20-something-year-old guy, having sex with and marrying or procreating with a girl who's in her teen years, it's just not unheard of over there. Like it's pretty run of the mill. And so he came here on a refugee status. And I mean, when they go to refugee places that are offered, they don't focus on, okay, let me go over the sexual, abuse laws of this country. They really encourage them about getting jobs and getting connected to, making sure that they have enough food and all the rest of it. And so his offense was that very thing. He was, 20, I think 25, and his victim was 14. And over there, totally normal. And he would never know the difference. And he kind of acknowledged, well, I should have known, he was cool about it. He said, I should have known this is a different country. I should have known the laws. And we see that with some of these, in this case, with my client who was from the FLDS, that was his same kind of similar thing that he dealt with because he, didn't really know much difference in terms of his development. So yeah, kind of a weird set of circumstances in terms of the motivation behind their offenses too.
So that'd be a low risk to reoffend because it's just an education piece almost. And I guess there's probably more complex than that, but
yeah, I mean, well, low risk to sexually reoffend, certainly. In terms of a reoffense, like just a general reoffense, and because the tricky part with these guys is when they come in at a young age like that, and then they become acculturated with the criminal justice system here in America, they learn just criminal shit. Like they have, like, especially if you go to prison, like or jail, you have to learn criminal stuff to get by, right? And so that actually, in a lot of ways, kind of increases the likelihood of a non-sexual crime in the future. So because of their age, because they're male, if they've never been, married, they had any long-term relationships, if the victim was unrelated, if it was a one-night stand that they had sex with the victim in less than 24 hours, all of those are statistically validated risk factors that increase the likelihood. So depends, I guess, is the answer. Like, yeah.
I get what you're saying though, Matt. Like, because if your assumption, if you're a person from another country or another culture like FLDS, that everything you're doing is just fine. It just seems like, again, anecdotal, but it just seems like their motivation for offense is going to be wholly different than somebody that's known that type of sexual activity is wrong right out of the gate. It seems like less predatory. I don't know. I mean, because Mace is right, kind of on like the aggregate big picture, but it does seem like on an individual level, somebody that, it's like coming from a different culture to where it's normed, especially if it's like, a really conservative kind of squared away type of guy that doesn't have a whole lot of criminal history, and he's operating under the assumption that it's par for the course to have a child bride. It once they learn the law, if they get on board with it, again, you would think that, because they wouldn't have like the same deviant interests. I don't know. It's but I think that's kind of what you're asking.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking, because I work a lot more with victims, and I've got quite a few clients who've been victimized their whole life, know nothing different. And the unlearning of that takes a long time of like, oh, I actually have autonomy over my own body. Like I'm actually allowed to say no to people touching me. Right. And that's just like mind blowing for them. So there's like the wiring isn't there almost of boundaries and healthy touch. And so I guess I'm just trying to look at it from the opposite perspective.
Yeah. What kind of age range are you talking with? The victims of sexual abuse that are
like, I'm thinking of clients like that are adults now that were victimized throughout their whole childhood and teen years. And then they ended up getting into abusive relationships as adults.
Go ahead.
Just never really learning about boundaries, about, that's not appropriate. That's not okay. That I can say no, that consent is a thing.
What would you say are the most troublesome symptoms that your clients are dealing with as adult? So they were victimized throughout their childhood, maybe into adulthood. And how are they manifesting that? Like, what are the symptoms that you see the most problems with?
I guess if we're kind of looking at like a DSM, it would be a lot of PTSD, a lot of dissociation. Those would be, so a lot of anxiety, hyperarousal, depression as a result of that, suicidal.
Yeah. Which, like you said, I mean, those type of symptoms, it's really kind of fascinating because on the perpetrator side, especially when I was doing domestic violence stuff, I don't know. I don't know what your guys' opinion is on this. I mean, do you guys ever think it's a good idea to treat perpetrators and victims like concurrently? Not the same perpetrator and victim. I'm saying, can you have enough, I don't know, professional and mental boundaries to treat both populations?
So the same, like the victim of, so treat the perpetrator that offended against that.
Oh,
victim?
no, I would never encourage that. I'm saying you
on your caseload,
you
have some perpetrators and then some victims, not necessarily of the same offense. Just
right.
Can you have the mindset to treat perpetrators? And so this might be a blind spot for me. I think I could, but I mean,
I do not. I mean, I don't work with a lot of sexual offenders. I have a few justice involved clients. And this is actually a question I was going to ask you guys, because a lot of my training is in kind of person-centered therapy, humanistic model, not labeling, looking at, trauma history, attachment.
Good old Rogers stuff.
Yeah.
Rogerian.
And one of the big,
you can't say, you can't do a hard G or no, that's a soft.
Roger.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Jur, that's a soft G. What's jur? It's a lame G.
That is a lame G.
Rogerian. Yeah, you can't say
got a lame G. Yeah.
Okay.
So Carl Rogers. Yeah,
there you go.
Good guy.
Yeah. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we got you.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, but I've been struggling a bit because one of my justice, he's recently out of jail. I've been working with him for a long time before he went to jail. But one of the big pieces of Rogerian therapy is unconditional positive regard.
Yeah.
And he's telling me about some crazy shit in jail, attacking prison guards, right? And ending people's careers and gang stuff. And, my kind of basic skills is to, be caring and compassionate towards people. And there's a part of me who, the group home worker from the yesteryear, right? The part of me that's I was a staff that worked with offenders, and I'm kind of getting pulled into that direction of sympathizing for the jail guards, but also trying to be present and attuned to him and what he was going through. And how he got treated, mistreated by the jail guard, and that's why it happened, sort of thing. So it's like I'm conflicted internally as I'm treating him. Hopefully this is making sense, but I think that's kind of what you're saying, Mace, of like, can you treat victims and offenders? I do, but I do kind of struggle with that.
Yeah. I guess it would be, can you treat victims and offenders? I should have qualified that a little bit better. Treating victims and offenders like out of kind of the same population dynamics. In other words, you're treating perpetrators of sexual abuse and concurrently treating victims of sexual abuse. Obviously not the direct victims. I'm saying, I thought about this, and I just say, I don't think I could do it well. I think I could do it, but I don't think I could do it well. And the reason why is I think what you're describing, Matt, because to treat the perpetrators, you definitely have to have a pretty, like, a different mindset. It's not excusing their behaviors, because we never want to do that even to them, right? But with victims, it's a little bit different approach, because with victims, when I've heard so I'd be doing domestic violence classes, and some of the ways that the guys were describing this was they were describing targeting, in kind of a predatory fashion, females that had a lot of the symptoms that you just described with some of your clients, Matt. And I asked them, well, why is that? And they said, well, because, they tend to, like you said, they don't set boundaries. Their value in the relationship is, I'm going to put myself out there sexually to you. And then as a result of that, then I get my immediate needs of companionship met, even if it's really toxic or whatever, abusive and all the rest of it. And so those guys said, well, yeah, it's kind of like if I met a girl who stood up for herself and had her shit together and, wasn't putting up with my nonsense, I wouldn't even spend time to try to do that, because there's so many other, people that are just so vulnerable that I can take advantage of that. So then I'd teach a class like that, and then not but a day later, I'd be doing a survivors class. And, some of the girls were like, man, am I just like a magnet for assholes? And I'm like, kinda, like, of course I would never say that to them. But then I was like, the guy just told me that everything that you're dealing with is exactly what they're targeting. And so,
well, what would you say to her then?
I don't know, because ultimately, like, I think what you want for victims is you don't want them to be experiencing those symptoms such that it leads to impairment in their life, right? And the only way to do that is for them to kind of get over this trauma as a historical event, which is kind of why we call it, not victims class or abuse, survivors class, and them start to reframe the way they view themselves and understand that, I can't set boundaries in a relationship, and my worth to another person is much more than just, my body as a vehicle for sex or whatever it is. But getting them there is a little bit more difficult. But you can't just say that. You can't just say, well, get over it, toots. Like, that's not going to work.
You feel like you had to have a hard time, like, because I get it. I've had the same types of interactions with dudes that have pretty well, in a moment of honesty and clarity, pretty well said that, they look for kind of boundaryless girls that throw themselves out there sexually. So, and I mean, and I know you know how to deal with guys like that, but you're saying internally you'd have a hard time then going and running a survivors course and empowering the women and like helping them, I guess, develop, assertiveness skills or something?
So on a superficial level, no. I know all the techniques and I know what to do in terms of like, so Jeff and I, we use a lot of person-centered stuff, but that's really with our motivational interviewing techniques. So, and that's not therapy. That's more of a style, but it's a style of delivering what we do, because we're cognitive behavioral therapists. So cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't really care much about your feelings other than to say that they're exaggerated or inaccurate, right? Which again, you don't want to really tell that. I mean, you can, but you don't want to bring that up in that way. So we use motivational interviewing to get them there. So it's kind of like, I've always compared it to capsules of medicine. If I break open one of those capsules, the powder on the inside tastes like hell. So the capsule's designed to get the medicine to your body to help. So MI is like the capsule, the medicine is the CBT.
Sure.
Yeah. So that helps me kind of frame that when how I'm using it, helps people understand what they mean by a style. But I guess what I'm saying is, so yes, I could do it superficially, but really getting down to kind of what Matt's question was, like, we know that's the thing I think that we do really well is, and this isn't, I don't know where this came from, and I don't know if you and I collectively came up with this or I read it in a book somewhere, but we describe it as a dispassionate compassion for the perpetrators that we work with. And I mean, all that is exactly what it sounds like, is that we can show compassion toward this person that says, you know, despite the fact that they have committed, you know, abhorrent offenses, we show dispassionate regard for those, but compassion to, well, what are the circumstances that somebody would have to be in to do that? Like, I always challenge clinicians I work with, just do a thought experiment. Like, of course you'd never sexually abuse somebody, but I'm just saying, under what circumstances could you see yourself doing that? Most people don't want to do that, but and that's fine. You don't have to. We can all agree that you'd have to be under some pretty desperate circumstances where that starts to make sense in your head. And I say, okay, you don't have to start exploring it or sympathize with that. I'm just saying that person was there at one point or another where it made sense to them. And as a result of that, they deserve some compassion towards that state of mind, such that we can treat them so they don't do this horrible thing again.
Well, it's going to make you a more effective therapist when you do that, because what people want to do is, when they think about sex offenders, is they want to make them the monster.
Yeah.
And again, that is easy, and it's a simple way to look at it, but it's a bit intellectually lazy. If you do the thought experiment that you're talking about, like, it sucks to consider, it's not fun, but when you can even almost kind of approximate a way to mentally go there, then all of a sudden you've humanized the client, and they're not a monster anymore, which means that, okay, they are a person, which means that you're going to be better able to actually identify what makes them tick, which means you're going to help them with risk management and make them safer in the long run.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So for your dude, Matt, your client, you're kind of caught with the internal battle of, like, okay, I want to be here for this guy, this former inmate. But the way he sabotaged these guards' careers, he's a complete asshole. And how do I reconcile that? And I think that just you answered it kind of in the way you posed the question to us, and that you're self-aware enough to realize that you're having a reaction to that dude. And rather than denying it to yourself, you're controlling for it. You're like, yeah, I think this guy's a dick, but I'm his therapist. I need to be there for him. So that gives you a chance to create that buffer in your head so that you can still, I guess, distance yourself from thinking of your buddies or like, I guess, I mean, you didn't know them, but like the types of people that get thrown under the bus by this guy. But it's that self-awareness, I think, that you just showed that you have, rather than denying. And I like all my clients equally, and they're all great and they're all perfect. Like, not, you're lying to yourself if you say that, you know?
Yeah, that actually, all of that helps me reconcile it. And I think I naturally kind of look at prison like survival. Like, it's just pure survival. And reputation is a big part of survival. And attacking a guard probably gets you some pretty big street cred.
Yeah. Right.
So that's kind of the lens I try and look at it through. Like, this guy's just trying to be top of the food chain.
Right. I never excuse that behavior. I just recognize it, that because like you said, Matt, like you said it well, it's a reality in which they live that, unfortunately, I mean, it's easy to just jump in and say, well, that's criminal thinking. I get it, but it's not. It's more survival techniques in there. You know, like if somebody, you know, challenge you to a fight in there for whatever reason, you know, which, I mean, nobody does. I challenge you to a duel, but it could be, you know, for whatever thing. If you don't, I mean, you might lose, but if you don't stand up for yourself, there's going to be major problems for you. And so, you know, I know everybody's like, well, be the better man. Like, no,
not
like,
in prison.
Yeah. It's just, I
if they take your tater tots, you better smash them in the face.
Right. I try to empathize. I mean, I don't think I've never had it extreme enough, because I've been curious with some of my clients, and I've never had it extreme enough where, you show up there and it's like, okay, first day on the yard, bro, you find the biggest dude and you bite his nose off or whatever.
Yeah,
I've never,
terrible advice.
Yeah, I've never heard about that. And that's like in movies and stuff.
Yeah.
But definitely, like, there are hard decisions they have to make. And unfortunately, yeah, it probably does. But that's what I'm saying is some of those kind of to that question way back was some of those otherwise low risk offenders that we deal with on a pretty regular basis become high risk offenders because of their involvement in the criminal justice system and their saturation within this, like, criminal minded environment that they have to adapt to. And they're very adaptable and resilient, but I mean, that's just to go along to get along. But I'll say how much. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say they're all probably leaving more traumatized than when they came in, eh?
Yeah,
Right.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
PTSD's pretty diagnosable for a lot of guys coming out of prison.
They won't admit that.
Yeah, how many of them, like the Walmart thing?
Oh yeah,
dude.
Yeah, like going into Walmart and some dudes have been down for 20 years at a time. So, I mean, they don't even know what a smartphone is, and
Walmart trips them all out.
Yeah, where they're like, wait a minute, I can go to like my. They have Walmarts in Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's worldwide.
You can camp in Walmart parking lots here.
Oh yeah, you can do that here too.
Yeah.
You can do that as long as it's like an RV type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would go to the self checkout that they have in Walmart there, and yeah, you couldn't. They couldn't fathom that you could check yourself out. They thought it was stealing.
It's the abundance of choice. In prison, you have your little Bob Barker brand toothbrush, and then like there might be one other choice. So it's like the abundance of choice. It overwhelms them. Their anxiety spikes. I've had clients, more than one client over the years, they'll get their cart full and they'll get so overwhelmed with the abundance of choice, they'll just leave their cart and leave they get tripped out that people will walk behind them in the aisle and brush them. They're like on guard, ready to fight. And like these guys are just having these like hyper vigilance, like flashbacks from prison, intense anxiety, wanting to avoid places like Walmart. It's like checks the boxes right down the line, and, I've told, I don't know. It's something that's first couple of times I heard this fear of Walmart, I just thought it was kind of like it was kind of humorous, but it's a thing. Like lots of dudes have this.
Yeah. Are you saying checks the boxes as far as like diagnostic criteria? Oh, okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
Lots of sleep issues too, eh?
Oh yeah. It's for the weirdest reasons though. They always say their bed is too comfortable. So I'm like, wait,
right.
What?
Yeah.
What?
There's not someone screaming and another person crying throughout the night. I can't sleep with all this quiet.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that kind of blew my mind working with some justice involved clients is, I kind of think of traumatizing things from prison being like assaults, gang beatings, getting shanked, right?
Mm-hmm.
For one
Rape.
of my clients, like, yes, witnessing murder, all that kind of stuff. But for one of my clients, isolation was the worst of it.
That's
this
pretty
guy
consistent.
spent an exorbitant amount of time in isolation. And that is what messed him up the most.
I don't even know how to feel about that, because like institutions will say that they need, SEG, ADSEG, whatever, PI, whatever the institution, they say they need it to govern unruly inmates. They need something to kind of be when you're in trouble within a prison. But yeah, as far as like the psychological effects, your anecdotal example matches a lot of mine. And I think a lot of research shows that that's like a kind of torture in a way, is that social isolation. But then, and so again, it's easy for me to feel some compassion for the inmate that spends, months on end in the hole. But then it's like, you talk to corrections officers and you hear the types of things that these dudes are doing and like the safety concerns that get brought up and why they need to put them in these situations. And I'm left stuck wondering how to feel about it, but I've seen what you're talking about. But what did you notice with your client as far as like, it's easy to understand how it affected him in prison, but did he carry any of that trauma from the hole out into life on the street?
Mm-hmm. Big time. Yeah. He definitely has PTSD. He witnessed multiple murders, tons of time in segregation, lots of assaults, getting assaulted. And yeah, he struggles a lot now. And then just getting out of jail, not being able to get a job, right? And not being able to have a purpose and everything that goes with that just kind of fuels all of it. And then you leave with all these beefs too. And then you're always looking over your shoulder and there's a lot of gang stuff here too. So that's an ongoing thing that, keeps them anxious, right? So you never really feel safe, I guess, even leaving a lot of the time. So yeah, so it's complex.
There's gangs in Canada?
Yeah. Oh, North Side.
Well, I know the truckers, they have their own gang, right?
Freedom fighters.
Did you have to deal with any of that, dude? I mean, off topic.
Yeah, like I'm a border city, so our borders were shut down.
Really?
Highways. Yeah.
What was that like?
It was a pain in the ass, to be honest. It's hard not to feel resentful. Like I'm coming to work, working my balls off throughout the whole pandemic.
Yeah.
And, I can't even get to work because the highway is closed.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get to work then?
Just take some back roads.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't, didn't wreck my day, but.
Well, that's what I kind of, it's cool. It's always, I don't know. It's always helpful to hear the other side of that. Cause here in America, I'll tell you, like, a lot of the stories that were propagated about that were, that your Trudeau was a dictator and of course he was just enforcing things that he didn't have the right to, and people were standing up for these truckers and donating to the cause and everything. And I'm like, there was always a piece of me that thought about what you just said. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay.
What about the Matt Barnes of the world?
If they're shutting down, I was like, if they're shutting down the highways, like, how does that help people who are just trying to go to work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I get you're standing for this and you don't want to get vaccinated or whatever.
Yeah. Fight for your right or whatever.
Well, right. My whole thing was that whatever gets me back to work. I don't care. What do you want me to do? I'll do. Yeah. Do you want me to sew a penis to my arm? Okay, I'll do that. Like whatever you want.
So
yeah. Can I get back? Yeah. Can I just get back to work? Like that's all I cared about. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, I get it. And I get how you're distanced from it. You're in America and you can rah those guys. But if I was there, I'd be pissed that I couldn't go to work.
Dude, I get like inconceivably mad when somebody is like slowly strolling across the crosswalk while I'm waiting to turn left.
Ooh, and when they look at you,
yeah, and they just
indignantly,
yeah, like you better put a kick in your step, son. But yeah, so I can't even deal with those people, let alone like weeks. How long did that go on for, Matt?
That was it felt like a month that went on for 2 solid weeks where it was all we heard about in the news.
Wow.
And I think it's cool when people rally together for like a common cause.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. But the flip side of it, and especially for people in Ottawa, like the fumes, the horns honking all the time, the partying, like the disruption, the blocking ambulances from getting to the hospital. It's like,
really?
People are dying here.
Oh, wow.
Like the shelters and just the chaos. Trudeau did not handle that well. He evoked the Emergencies Act, which is just unheard of.
Is an absolute train wreck on all sides.
Every side.
Because again, I see what you're saying too. It's like it is. Yeah, stand up for what you believe in, fight for your right, all that Beastie Boys, but. but like,
yeah, I'm sure that's what they had in mind.
They played that. They were blaring that. Gotta fight for your right. But yeah, it's like, if you're trying to make a dent in Trudeau, if you're trying to inconvenience Trudeau, like that's not really doing it. It's inconveniencing you, like dudes like you.
Yeah.
Well, and the annoying thing too was like they, at least in Ontario, they had kind of at some point through that whole thing announced like, okay, we're ending masks. Here's kind of the deadline here. And then I think it was, I don't know when it was, but the whole Ukraine thing happened, right? And then it's like, okay, you guys are really think that you don't have any freedom? And people in Ukraine are literally getting bombed. Dude. Like, and that's when I lost all sympathy for that cause.
Yeah.
Like,
perspective.
Okay, you have to wear a mask in Walmart and you feel like your freedoms are taken away.
Right.
It's crazy how something like an actual war can kick off to put things back in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's equally encouraging though. Because I'm like, wow, we don't really have that many problems to deal with.
Yeah, it is like, man, like we think things are so awful here. It's like, my God, like those people are dealing with an invasion.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like masks are annoying, and I think here, do they still have masks up there, Matt?
We right now we don't have to wear masks.
Oh, cool. Because I think everywhere down here, Utah kind of didn't do any, like they had 2 weeks of stuff. Then they stopped doing
Utah
everything.
wasn't so bad.
Utah's like, see ya. Yeah. So, and then when they tried to enact it, like a mayor tried to put it in place, the legislator like overruled her and said, nope, you can't make rules like that. So, but I was like, so mask is a minor annoyance, but then I loved people that said, oh, it's just a first, like the slippery slope people, that's just the first step. Next thing you know. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the next? I was like, it's pretty reasonable. I get it. Like it's dumb. And you might have some science that says it doesn't work. And maybe they're not paying attention to that right now. Okay. It's going to come around. But I was like, it's a minor annoyance is what it is. You know what I mean? Like it's not in it, but I was like slippery slope. Like, okay, did it ever go beyond that? Like, where did it go? Maybe in California, there was some weird stuff that happened, but here, nothing. Like I didn't notice anything.
Yeah, the coastal states got a little weird.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Like I felt bad for some people, like getting their restaurants and stuff shut down.
Right.
Weird situation altogether. But yeah, obviously with Ukraine and rebels, we don't have many problems.
Right.
So, okay. So, hey, I was going to ask you, you mentioned in because when it comes to Jeff and I, do you have any clients who are like survivors right now, victims, anything like that?
They're perpetrators that were victims at one point.
Okay.
If you count that.
Right. Yeah. But no exclusive.
No.
Okay. So, you mentioned in the email leading up to this, Matt, as we were kind of discussing content and stuff, because you're an EMDR practitioner. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering what your thoughts were. You mentioned the use of like psychedelics for purposes of treating trauma. And I mean, I know very little about it. I haven't looked into it. But what I do know is that, well, I don't know. Do you know, well, first of all, since you're kind of more in the victim realm, I mean, what do you know about it? What are your thoughts about that?
Psychedelics and with EMDR, or just totally separate from EMDR
to treat.
Yeah. Just treatment of PTSD in general.
Yeah. I could talk a little bit about my experience. Maybe I'll start with EMDR because that's kind of been the main modality I've used in my career. I don't even know where to start with it, but the whole premise behind EMDR is this adaptive information processing model that essentially, like, how we look at the brain is that it's oriented towards health. And that through our life, we go through a lot of experiences and our brain will just naturally digest those experiences and store them away properly. I guess the premise with EMDR is that trauma interrupts that process and things get kind of stuck. So the EMDR kind of case conceptualization is that these traumatic events have affected people's neurological, neural networks. And so when we're talking about the survivors group that you run, right? Like their trauma of being abused has affected their current behaviors, but it's also affected them emotionally and their whole belief system about themselves. So probably a lot of those survivors feel very defective, like they're not good enough, like they don't matter. And so they get their needs met through sex or being promiscuous or whatever that is. So EMDR goes in to try and find the roots of where those beliefs developed. So we're trying to unblock information that has kind of like jammed up that adaptive information processing network in the brain.
Okay. So when you say your brain is oriented towards health, the adaptive, the adaptive function of the brain would say that if you go through a normal trajectory of human development, that you wouldn't start basing your relationships and getting your needs met through promiscuous behavior. You wouldn't emotionally regulate by using drugs. You wouldn't seek out kind of those, or avoid. Well, you wouldn't even have the inclination to avoid things that would trigger really harmful memories and stuff like that. The adaptive functions have now been impaired as a result of this trauma that, if unresolved, will just continue to impair and potentially get even worse, right? So EMDR targets to undo those things and get them back to an adaptive level of functioning. Okay.
Exactly. So like, we look at addiction like a client trying to self-soothe, right? So then we try and understand like, okay, what was your, what developmental needs went unmet as a child? What was your relationships like with your parents? So we're doing a lot of history. We're trying to understand their attachment history. Was there neglect? So with neglect, a lot of times they had to learn to self-soothe on their own. So that could be where addiction could stem from. So with PTSD, it's caused by the storage of disturbing information in the nervous system. So that's where it sort of gets stuck with these negative beliefs. So like, I'm 5, my parents get divorced. I start to believe that if only I was a better kid, maybe they would have stayed together, right? So that seed gets planted. That belief is like, okay, well, now I have to be perfect. So then I become like a high achiever. I don't do anything wrong. I just want to please my parents. Maybe they'll get back together. And then that just sort of like snowballs into probably a lot of anxiety, perfectionism, things like that, right? So that's, just one example. But, I kind of think about like when I was in grade 1 or 2, like somebody told me if I swallowed a watermelon seed, I'd grow a watermelon in my belly.
Yeah.
So I didn't eat watermelons for a long time, right? But so these like, we're kids when we don't have appropriate caregivers, we don't have good messaging, we don't learn my body is my own, these are my parts, no one gets to touch them, right? Like those seeds just sprout into a lot of, we call them negative cognitions.
Yeah.
In EMDR. So there's kind of themes of negative cognitions that we can kind of, when we work with clients, we can start to group these themes of maladaptive belief systems. So the one theme that has kind of 2 parts is about responsibility. So this could be, it's my fault that I was raped, or I shouldn't have worn that outfit, right? I should have done something different.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm weak because my dad beat me.
Yeah.
So that's responsibility. So that's about action. But there's also a self-worth or defectiveness piece of responsibility. So I'm bad. I'm unlovable. Like a lot of your survivor clients would probably feel like I'm not good enough. They get that sense of superficial self-worth through pleasing men, maybe sexually.
Sure.
So that's responsibility. That's one huge theme. Shame, like core shame, we see a lot with trauma, with abuse, especially sexual abuse. And then there's safety and vulnerability. So I'm not safe is a really common negative belief that a lot of people that have been traumatized feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in danger. I can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
So that's another category. Then another one is control and choice. So I'm not in control. I can't trust myself. I find a lot of people that have been gaslighted They really develop a lot of self-doubt, insecurity in decisions.
Matt, when you have clients that, like, so you're kind of going through these different potential categories, are you kind of trying to pick out some themes, some common themes of like belief systems that you seem to see clustered together, or are the clients, do the clients come to your office with that understanding, like, oh, I have this perfectionism built from this need to be perfect because my parents got divorced, and when I was little, I told myself this. Like, are clients coming to your door with that, or are you kind of sniffing out some of the beliefs and helping?
There's a lot of sniffing out.
All right.
They'll come in and say, I'm just so anxious all the time. Right. Like
so that's what you get to start with. I have to do
everything perfect. I have to be right all the time. And I'm getting in fights at work. And then we have to like go back and try and find where these seeds were planted. And we do that usually pretty early with EMDR. Like in the training, they say in the first 3 or 4 sessions, you should have their whole attachment and trauma history from 0 to now, which to me, that's backfired on me a few times, especially with clients, like I mentioned, that didn't know what they went through wasn't okay. Clients with chronic abuse that haven't really put together that, oh, like my parents aren't supposed to, touch me.
So when they're putting these timelines together, if they haven't realized this, how does that manifest? Like, how do you see, like, oh, damn, this backfired. This client doesn't realize that this isn't their fault.
Yeah. What's the opposite of a breakthrough?
Right. Yeah. Right.
It would be that.
It's a dissociation.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
More suicidality.
Yeah.
Nightmares, more flashbacks.
Okay. You know what's kind of cool about the way you describe these things is the target appears to be the same with CBT,
right?
Because what you're describing in CBT, we call them core beliefs. That's it. The difference is CBT doesn't care about your history. Like the premise is the only thing that we can change is behavior from here forward. And so our discussion of the history is going to be very minimal. Instead, we target some of these themes that you discussed, which come out as cognitive distortions, that then we have them, we try to address those in real time and then have those change. And the theory then is that as you start to change some of these cognitive distortions, which are brought about by automatic thinking, that will nudge the core beliefs back into a more adaptive and functional way of thinking about themselves. But, and if you start to uncover these through a theme, you bring it up to them, but never do you have to have a conversation about historical traumas. So, I mean, you can, it's not unheard of, but CBT, it's not like a required ingredient, but the target is still the same though.
Right.
Like your method on how you get there is different.
This would be a big, so in EMDR, a big piece of it is incorporating emotion and body sensation. And I talked a little bit about last episode, like the 3, limbic system, brainstem, prefrontal cortex. We're trying to connect those. And the way that we see things through EMDR would be that traumatic experiences disrupt the ability to use your prefrontal cortex so that we could, clients can't access the CBT tools because their prefrontal cortex is getting flipped over down into their limbic system so often because of the triggers that are unprocessed.
Yep.
So what do you do? So let's say you identify that may well be the case, and CBT is not really landing because they've got this block, this trauma-based block. So like, what is it you actually do then to try to cut through that?
Sounded like an Office Space type of thing. What is it that you actually do?
What is it that you actually do? Yeah.
So we're always trying to get to the first experience. So I guess let's try and pull up do you have an example of maybe something like a trigger that we could kind of use as an example?
Yeah, just do a cliched one. Somebody hears a car backfire and all of a sudden they feel like they're back in Vietnam or something.
Okay. So the backfiring leads to like an overreaction.
I don't know what cars are backfiring these days. My Tesla backfired.
So we'd probably, I mean, a lot of people are stuck like up in their head. So we're trying to get them into their body. What's the feeling? What's the sensation you get? So it's probably fear, right? This brings me back to the battlefield. Then we're going to try and go to ideally the worst experience of that fear, of that, if it's along that continuum of noise, like of gunfire or battle.
So in your therapy session, you then try to through discussion, bring them back to at least, the memory of the most impactful event that led to that fear that has been triggered. You're trying to guide them through that.
And a big caveat of that is there needs to be good therapeutic alliance. They need to have good grounding tools, because we need them to have 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the past.
Yeah.
PTSD, they're both feet in the past, right? So we want to develop some strategies, some coping tools to keep them grounded here, and for them to feel safe to go back in their mind to the battlefield. So then we're going to find eventually over time the worst experience that backfiring triggers. And it's a little bit like exposure therapy. So I kind of say, like, if your life was a movie, pause it at the worst part of that chapter or that scene. That's the image we want them to hold in their mind. But we also need to find a negative cognition that goes with that image.
Yeah.
So and
that can be really difficult.
I was just going to say, so in our hypothetical example, the veteran is maybe like both him and his buddy have been captured, they're POWs, and his buddy gets executed. That's the pop of the gun. That's the backfiring car. And his thought is that it should have been me or something.
Yeah.
So okay. So you have them freeze frame their buddy getting popped and that thought.
Yes, exactly. That thought is probably not the true negative cognition. It's probably like, I should have done something, or it's my fault, or
explain that. That's interesting. So like, what is it that would most likely not make that the main negative cognition, and how do you get to what the fundamental one is?
It's a good question. I guess I'm trying to understand another part of my training is an emotion focused therapy. So we're trying to identify the core emotion that was evoked, the core maladaptive emotion. So when when I think about it, should have been me. Like that situation, there's survivor guilt typically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like it should have been me that died.
Right. But that seems like a thought that comes after the fact, not one that you'd have in the moment. So in the moment, so yeah, it should have been me is a response to the guilt that you're experiencing as a result of this.
In the moment, you might have the thought, I'm glad that wasn't me, and then felt really guilty for thinking that.
Right. Like you could, because in CBT, it's cool again, because again, the target remains the same. Like, so yeah, CBT always goes back to the thought, right? And the here and now thought too. Again, it does not care about the past. We do though recognize that, emotions play a significant role in that. And so we have an entire module dedicated to emotional regulation techniques, because we just recognize that if your emotion is inappropriate for the circumstances, or it's exaggerated, the intensity of the emotion is too high, that's going to cloud your thinking. And then, that'll just result in bad outcomes either way. So we help them recognize that too, which accompanies the physical sensations, to say, okay, before you start going through this process, you need to use an emotional regulation technique. But at the end, we always encourage them to come back to the thinking of the here and now to challenge whatever the maladaptive thought pattern is that's going to lead to a behavior. And then essentially what we're trying to do is adapt that long-term to say, well, my life is improving, so I'm just going to change the way that I think about things by virtue of having better outcomes currently. And EMDR, on the other hand, is kind of bringing them back to that moment in time and really changing the narrative for them of saying, so it's helping them reframe that so they don't have to now look through these lenses and basing their life on these really shitty core beliefs that are leading to them out. So it's kind of, you're working on a more fundamental level of really targeting hard the core beliefs, whereas CBT is often working on a superficial level with a trickle down effect, trying to get to like the core beliefs by, you know, we're going to target the here and now. And as a result of that, you're going to see better outcomes. And then naturally, you're just going to change your attitude about these things because it makes more functional sense for you to do those things. So that's kind of cool. But either way, the target is the same.
Right.
The emotion, like the guilt, that might be what they come in with, right? Like it should have been me. And then they sewer their whole life, right? They live in regret and punish themselves. But underneath that, like what's really adaptive, the adaptive emotion in that situation would be fear.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like you're helpless. Yeah. You're held at gunpoint. So we want to get back and help resolve that you had no control. So kind of the negative cognition would probably be I'm helpless, I'm powerless, or I'm not safe. That sort of fits with that situation. So we want to help resolve that. And that's going to then resolve that survivor guilt because I had no control. I was held at gunpoint. I was handcuffed, whatever the case is.
Right. It's a shitty situation, but I mean, I was completely out of control. There was a gun. There was nothing that I could have done. Like that. That's a pretty functional thought about that circumstance that you want to bring them back to. So, okay. So here's my question then, because I've never understood this. How would shrooms help any of that?
I was just going to ask that.
Like, how would taking a hit of acid help any of that? Like I would think that.
When do we take the shrooms?
You do that and then you bring them back there. I'm like,
yeah.
Like how would that help?
It's too real.
Yeah. How would, do you know anything about that, Matt? Like how, how
we
the
could
hell
get
is
into
that supposed
that
to
for
help?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know that shrooms would be the best, but what I understand about psychedelics is that they decrease activation in the amygdala.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the default mode network. So the default mode network, it's a region of the brain that lights right up when we're in like sort of introspective thought, when we're criticizing ourselves, when we're going through past negative experiences. The default network is just like firing. So psychedelics help to drop that down so that we get rid of that negative internal dialogue. The amygdala decreases, euphoria increases, and we can re-look at memories and experiences through a different lens.
So are we talking like MDMA then?
This is where we could probably get into like different drugs. So MDMA is very effective for PTSD.
And do they do like a full, I don't know, dose of it, like to the degree that you get like high?
Yes.
Wow.
So
not like microdosing then that I've heard about. Okay.
It's not legal yet, but so MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, they're doing a lot of the research with MDMA. And from what I could see, like kind of the treatment protocols, like 10 sessions, 3 of them are with MDMA.
Okay.
And they're about 8 hours long.
Holy cow. So is it a therapist who's working with you or a shaman?
Two therapists.
2?
Usually a male and a female.
And are they high too?
No, they're not high.
Damn it.
You just had a rave.
It might want to be though. I don't know. It's a long time to be with somebody.
They give you glow sticks.
Yeah. Oh man.
Wow.
8 hours.
8.
Do the therapists work in like shifts? Like, or are both therapists? What's that?
They can tag each other out, but they're typically there. And, it might not always be 8 hours. I think that's kind of what they allot because they want to do some integration at the end as well. And then usually at the beginning, there's kind of setting some intentions and making sure they feel comfortable and safe. And
so is the MDMA, is that administered early on or in like the later parts of the 10 session protocol?
I think it's kind of spaced out throughout.
Okay.
So they'll do like 3 or 4, and I'm not an expert with this with MDMA at all. I don't have any training with it, but from what I understand, it's like
no formal training.
Yeah, plenty of recreational training. We know that. We know.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
3 or 4 prep sessions, building that, rapport, do an MDMA session, do a few integration sessions, plan for the next one, and then do another psychedelic session.
Okay.
Sort of thing.
Okay.
Wow.
So yeah, MDMA is really helpful for PTSD. Mushrooms, psilocybin, is proven really effective for, they're doing a lot of research with end of life distress.
Wow.
Okay.
So people with terminal illnesses. So there's a huge existentialism, mysticism piece with mushrooms.
Yeah. Like the people
you guys might know.
really philosophical about
Yeah,
life in general.
Yes. And love, and more connected to the earth and what's truly important in life.
So they're watching movies that don't mean anything at all. And they're like, dude, you really think about the true meaning of this movie? And you're like, what? Yeah. It's Resident Evil, bro. Like, it's basically meaningless.
But evil is resident within all of us, as is good. If you think about it.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
That makes sense, man. Cause people that, they're faced with their own mortality and, they've got 3 months to live and, they're facing this dread. And then, mushrooms can, I guess, if guided by a therapist and setting is taken care of. I mean, I could see that, right? The person now, I guess, comes to grips with their own death, has maybe a better outlook on it. It's because, it's hard to talk somebody that's stone sober into like, you're going to die in 3 months and it's cool.
It opens up their mind to, things beyond this life and this planet. Energy, altered, universes, things like that. Like It's similar with LSD, DMT. The ego, there's ego dissolution sometimes. So it's like, I can see beyond just me. There's a bigger purpose, more things for me ahead. So it can really decrease that depression, anxiety that goes with, I'm going to die soon. So that's where mushrooms are really helpful. We're actually applying for a research study to be a site for a study on microdosing mushrooms for smoking cessation.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
Yeah. So there's a lot with psychedelics with addictions as well.
Yeah.
But we've been working with ketamine, which is the only legal psychedelic.
Which is really weird. I mean,
I know.
In terms of the addictive properties of psilocybin, isn't it zero? I mean, and then
it's the safest drug.
Right. You can't overdose on it or anything.
No.
Like, I'm just saying, if we could get an agreement garnered, like if we could broker a deal with opioid users and just say, look, if you stop using heroin or opiates, we will give you a lifetime supply of mushrooms.
Yeah.
Never ending.
Broker a deal.
Well, like, I mean, wouldn't you go for that?
Yeah. Well, here, I mean, my evidence right here is Joe Rogan, so take it with a grain of salt. But he talks a lot about ibogaine being used in the treatment of like opiate addiction,
right?
And that's, I mean, maybe a similar concept. I'm not sure what ibogaine is, though. Is it a root? Do we know?
I believe it is a root.
Yeah.
When I was in California for that
radio
conference.
Yeah. It was not a Radiohead Radiohead podcast. Yeah. They just play shitty music in the background. No, a Radiolab podcast about ibogaine. There's a whole thing about that, how effective it was and stuff.
For addiction, right?
Yeah, for addiction. Specifically opiate addiction.
One session of ibogaine is completely eradicating addiction with some people.
Wow. That's
but they're intense, like very difficult trips. So when I was at that conference, there was a vet that came up and talked about his experience with ibogaine. He's formed this whole veterans association that's trying to fund other vets to go and get ibogaine treatment, because you can only do it in Mexico. And that's the shitty thing about psychedelics, is they're all legal. So it's so difficult to access them.
Yeah.
And it's expensive to get trained. But that's side note. And he was saying like, they're like 15 to 20 hours.
Wow.
Trips. Yeah.
And is that in a therapist's office, or You just wandering around Tijuana?
Yeah. It's a great idea.
Yeah. Just wander into a donkey show. You're like, whoa.
I do feel better.
I'm not ever using drugs again.
Yeah, I feel better about myself now.
No more heroin.
Yeah.
No, that's although I'm not saying the therapeutic aspect. I'm just saying a straight trade. We'll give you shrooms forever if you stop using heroin. I'd go for it. I'd be like, yeah. Like, I mean, sure. Yeah. Use my tax dollars for that. That sounds fine.
Man.
But yeah, I wonder if that will ever make its way into anything that we do, microdosing or like actual.
It seems like people are opening up to the idea of legality with it. I have a buddy that has gone through ketamine treatments for PTSD. Yeah.
What did he think?
It didn't help him, unfortunately. No. Yeah. Which kind of sucks. He's a war vet.
Okay.
Yeah. He's tried everything, but yeah, it didn't. He actually was holding out a lot of hope for it, so it's kind of a bummer. But
did he have to go to Mexico for that?
No.
Oh no, because it's okay,
like right in Layton or something.
Okay,
was it with a therapist?
A doctor.
Okay, yeah, because this is a thing there's kind of a good and bad and ugly side of psychedelics. The bad, I think, is these ketamine's becoming really popular, but it's kind of becoming like the new like health boutique. You could go and like just get intramuscular ketamine and sit in a room by yourself, and there's no psychotherapy.
Yeah,
you need to have, in my opinion, you need to have psychotherapy when you're doing these medicines.
Because otherwise it's like unguided. It doesn't have like.
Well, this seems similar to.
That's true.
Well, okay, so like think about just medication assisted treatment, right? So like if I'm addicted to heroin, for example, and I go in and I get either Vivitrol or Suboxone or methadone, whichever one of those, right? All of those are not designed to. I mean, those are not designed to treat addiction. Like addiction is not just the substance using component, but the behavioral component and the cognitive component that goes along with it. It is that all that is doing is controlling symptoms such that you can engage in treatment meaningfully. Like
our Bureau of Prisons contract requires that if someone's on Suboxone, they have to be in therapy.
Right. Yeah. And that should be that way. I mean, I think, I would say, if, even an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, if you're taking one of those, like you're just relieving symptoms at that point. Like what about the cognitions or behavioral circumstances that led to the development of that disorder in the first place? Like It's not just, so you get a relief of symptoms as that treated the underlying, behavioral problems that led to it in the first place. That's what I'm saying.
It's like to Matt's point
100%.
about someone taking ketamine and sitting in a room, which again I think is what my buddy did. I don't think there was any.
So
guided.
and same thing with mushrooms or MDMA. You might experience a relief of symptoms temporarily as a result of that, but any long-term change in terms of your relationship with the disorder in the first place, that needs to go through psychotherapy. Right. That's like 100%. That needs to be accompanied and. What I think is I like that those things exist. I don't think psychotherapy is the only answer, because when I deal with somebody who is, unfortunately, especially being a CBT practitioner, that's a crap in, crap out system. So if the thoughts going into the system are so distorted by something like, an addiction or depression or anxiety or PTSD or whatever it is, I'm not going to be able to make much headway unless I get symptom relief to a degree that they can start to have meaningful thoughts about their circumstances. So I'm fine, but a combination of both is usually the best medicine. Of course. So yeah.
Yeah, it drives me nuts here. I don't know if it's the same there, but methadone clinics, there's no treatment plan. The treatment is you take it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I know that you're supposed to be on it for a hot minute, but I think the treatment plan is very similar here. Like, they'll just kind of as just a matter of, you could be on this for the rest of your life. And clients, therefore, they will not adhere to what the like clinically recommended dosage might be, which could be like 18 to 24 months. with accompanying psychotherapy on top of that. But they're like, wait, what? My whole life? So then they do it for like 6 months and then they taper, and then lo and behold, they're back to relapsing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They just don't like the idea. I'll be on this for the rest of my life. Like, well, no, not necessarily. Maybe. But
is it just kind of from like the methadone clinic's perspective, just like a harm reduction thing? Just like, well, at least they're not taking heroin, so whatever. Like, what's the mindset behind it? Why don't they have more of a structured plan?
So I think methadone, you don't get that high that you do from opiates, right? Like it manages the symptoms, but you're not getting. I don't think
it's much of a high.
No, you shouldn't. Methadone is probably, of the three of them, methadone's probably the because methadone you could, if depending on the dosage you took, because it's a synthetic opiate, you could always continue to get high if you could overdose and die on methadone, right? Whereas with like Suboxone, because there's a ceiling effect on it, like you're only going to be able to get so high, and so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the idea about, so like kind of how it's been described is like imagine like one of those swinging doors, right? But there's a chain on the door, but the chain has some slack. So you can get the door open partially, but you can't open it all the way. So you feel some of the effects of it, but it's enough to take the edge off. So the analogy sometimes is, imagine I was drinking like a fifth of Jack Daniels every day. Well, Suboxone would be equivalent to taking a shot. It's enough to take the edge off, but it's not going to get you high any longer. Nor could you take more of it and get higher, because there's a ceiling effect. And Vivitrol has there's no psychoactive properties to it whatsoever. Yeah. So there's, and it kind of depends on severity is usually what they want you to base that off of. If you're kind of, Vivitrol is a really popular one because you're not getting high. It doesn't show up on a UA. So drug courts really dig it and stuff like that. But, a lot of the best practices would say that if you're to that degree, you're shooting, 3 balloons a day of heroin, you probably should be on Suboxone or methadone, would say, in terms of administering that, and psychotherapy has probably the best outcomes.
Right.
Yeah. But Vivitrol's not it's a really good drug. It's a pretty big game changer, but yeah, It
sounds like the whole medical model in North America is just a little bit short-sighted.
Oh yeah.
Like
pills and stuff.
Yeah. Quick fix.
Yeah.
Pills and stuff.
Yeah. That's funny.
But with the way that we're doing ketamine, so we got trained through, it's a place in London, about an hour from where we live. It's called the Mind Setting Institute. Uh-huh. It's a psychologist that developed this protocol. And it's heavily psychotherapeutically based. So we do an initial assessment, a psych assessment, and typically we're screening, is this treatment resistant depression, anxiety, PTSD? So they need to have exhausted other forms of therapy, like pharmacological interventions, kind of done other forms of treatment, and with minimal or no effect. So those would be typically the clients that we're taking through the program right now. And then we refer them to a doctor who does a medical assessment. The nice thing with ketamine is there's no contraindication, so it doesn't work on the serotonin level like MDMA and psilocybin do. So if you're on SSRIs, you don't feel the effects of MDMA and mushrooms.
Really?
So with ketamine, you can be on SSRIs and you will still have the same effect. So once they do the medical assessment, the doctor prescribes it to them, one-time use. We do a planning session where we're setting goals, like what do we want to work on? So I've done this with clients that I've seen for years, and then I've done this with clients that are new to me. So we're trying to identify like what are the biggest blocks to getting better. And those are the things that we're going to try and bring up in the psychedelic session. When the guards dropped, when they can, tolerate it. Ketamine is kind of a wonder drug. And I like when I heard about ketamine being used, I was like, that's a horse tranquilizer.
I know.
It always had a really bad kind of reputation around here, is
I always think on old school when Stifler gets shot in the neck, you know?
Yeah.
Or no, it's Will Ferrell's character that gets shot in the neck.
Yeah. But then you hear like people talk about ketamine. You ever tried ketamine, bro? It's wild.
Go down a K-hole.
Yeah. Oh, you're a good representative.
Do you guys know about the history of ketamine?
Guys, I actually overbooked. I've got to actually get going here. We should.
You got to leave?
I have a 3:45.
What a loser this guy is. Yeah, look at that. Okay, what, a session?
Yeah.
Oh, who cares?
So I better drive fast.
Yeah, you'll be all right. Well, yeah, that you know what we need to do before we'll wrap up.
It seems like we have a lot to talk about.
I know.
Consistently.
We got to have another but we got to get like a social work podcast co-op going where we all get on each other's shows and stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're like our only other.
Matt's the only other one.
I mean, we always have stuff that we want to talk about, but it seems like short-sighted of us to like not reach out more. You know?
Who else is cool, Matt?
Yeah. You guys are it.
Have you tried other places?
No, I haven't. I honestly haven't. I've dabbled in them, but I just didn't really.
We should just start it, dude. We should just start it,
Yeah,
and then do one of those. They have like true crime podcast conventions. I'm like, why don't we have one of those for social work conventions, so I can get together and see all these nerds?
What is it? April? What is today? The 9th?
April 8th today.
April 8th. We're starting the social work co-op.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We got to come up with a cool name for it. So. Okay, well, we'll let this loser get to his stuff
here, boys.
Yeah,
I know, man. Yeah,
cool stuff, man. Well, hey, thanks for all the help on that, on the understanding more about the trucker situation too. Love that. So
okay, glad I could clear that up.
We'll be in touch, man. We'll see you soon, huh?
Okay, that sounds good, guys.
Okay, to talk see you, buddy.
Okay,
all right.
See ya.
And that about does it for this episode of the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast. We thank our friend from the north, Matt Barnes. Please take a moment and check out his podcast, the Social Work Me Podcast. Show him some love by subscribing, giving him a 5-star rating, and share him with a friend. You can also find us, the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And dude, if you're thinking about anything but a 5-star rating, yeah, I'm talking to you. Those guys and gals giving 3-star ratings and 4-star ratings, you guys are just phantasmagoric, kooky weirdos. Keep those keystrokes and mouse clicks to yourself, freak. Just stick with a 5-star rating, subscribe, and share with a friend. We'd like to stay and chat longer, but we're lying. Good night.